Songs that help us find God in everyday life. I have chosen two songs. I almost chose three actually, but we don't have time for three, to help us do that this morning and hopefully for the rest of our lives. But I have to make two apologies for my choices. The first choice is, of course, Psalm 23. That's the sermon title. Psalm 23, "The Lord is not just my shepherd," or "The Lord is not just my shepherd." Can you hear the slight difference between the two? Psalm 23 is over 2,600 years old. It's a really old song. Why on earth would that speak to us today? And the other song that I have chosen is actually a music video by a great artist of our time called Kanye West. You wouldn't kind of think him to be a natural composer of church hymnody, but the title of the song is "Jesus Walks," and the refrain in that song is "Jesus walks with me." And I hope you will enjoy it as we listen to this. We'll have a music video, so you will have both a visual and the soundtrack as well. And just to help you through the song, there's also an insert in the bulletin where you have the lyrics to the song. It's quite long, 4 minutes long, and the lyrics is quite meaty. And the reason why I've chosen Psalm 23 and this song together is because I believe Kanye West is actually in this music video producing a powerful interpretation of Psalm 23 for our day. Kanye West, of course, is quite controversial, even in the music industry. And the music industry, certainly here in North America, is not known for its intolerance. But I want you to bear with me and give Kanye and me and God the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully we know what we're doing. As we go through the psalm, I want you to take in the visual interpretation of the psalm as well, and notice how Kanye is interpreting Psalm 23 through the experience of the people whom we see on screen. There is one particular direct allusion to Psalm 23, and I dare you to find where it is. Follow along with the lyrics, and I wonder whether you will notice it. The other thing I want you to notice is that especially in the last half of the video, who are the people that Jesus is walking with? So two tasks as we listen. Number one, what is the allusion to Psalm 23? Number two, who are the people that Jesus is walking with? Let's watch and listen. The Lord is not just my shepherd. The Lord is not just my shepherd. That's part one of what I want to talk with you about. And the Lord is not just my shepherd is the other thing I want to talk with you about. But I guess we need to kind of start with clearing the air here, because is Psalm 23 really a song that can still help us today find God in our everyday lives? We heard from Sam Leahy, it works for her. It works for people of my age and older, because we've grown up with Psalm 23 and with the traditional imagery of shepherds and sheep and stuff like this. But does it work for the modern man and woman, for modern young people here in North America and elsewhere in the world? Can we really work with imagery where when the Lord is my shepherd, that makes me a sheep? In the modern age, certainly in the West, where we are not familiar really with agriculture as much as people used to be, we think of sheep as dumb herd animals. They just run with the crowd. They don't have an independent spirit. There's no individualism. They just do as they're told. Is that how we want to live our lives? No, we don't. We want to be individuals. We want to be independent. We want to be free. Why do we need a Lord who shepherds us, perhaps with a rod and a stick, as the psalm seems to suggest? And yet, I believe, when we get past the imagery and realize that both of these songs have grown out of lived experience of someone who has been in dire straits, we realize that as we read God's word in the Psalms and with Psalm 23, as we listen to great songs and music videos, as we have just done here, this can help us find God today. I want to unpack a little bit more about the psalm and get a little bit deeper than perhaps you have thought about the psalm before. But before I do so, I want to give you another interpretation of the psalm. This is a medium modern one from the mid-1970s, from a record by a rock band Pink Floyd, their 1976 album Animals, which has a song called Sheep in it, and actually gives you the lyrics of Psalm 23, but it plays along to a rather menacing tune, and then the lyrics are sung in a very menacing tone as well. Let me read the lyrics to you. And now I've just lost where I was on my thing here. Just bear with me for a moment. Here we are. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down through pastures green. He leadeth me the silent waters by. But then it continues nicely into a more modern take on the psalm. With bright knives he releaseth my soul. He maketh me to hang on hooks in high places. He converteth me to lamb cutlets. And this is exactly the kind of interpretation of the psalm where modern people may think, how can this psalm still speak to us? A shepherd isn't in the sheep herding business for the sheep's sake. The shepherd is in the business of making money. He shears the sheep for her wool, and if the sheep is unlucky, the sheep gets slaughtered and ends on the table. What good is that kind of psalm for us today? Worse still, even if we go back into the times of the Old Testament, guess what happens to you, as the psalm says at the end, I will remain in the house of the Lord forever. Really? If you're a sheep? Especially if you're a male lamb? What happens to you when you get to the temple? You get slaughtered. So what is the imagery of the psalm doing for us then and today? I now want to read to us from an ancient version. This is the King James Version from the 1600s. This is, of course, very old-fashioned English, and partly the English that Kanye West used when he alluded to the psalm. Let me read the psalm to you again, and I want you to pick up, number one, the reference in the music video, but then also a shift halfway through the psalm, where the psalm actually shifts from the imagery of the shepherd to the imagery of something else. I hope you will get it. This is under the heading, The Lord is not just my shepherd. Listen. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Lord is not just my shepherd. What else is he in this psalm? He is my host. I will dwell in his house forever. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. He anoints my head, my cup runs over. So what we have here in this amazing song that helps us to encounter God in our lives today is a mixture of metaphors. God isn't just the ancient equivalent of my cowboy. I'm not a cow, I'm not a sheep. I'm a human being with deep emotional and physical needs. I need the Lord to look after me, to be my host, but also to be my shepherd, to protect me against enemies. And that brings us back to Kanye West's music video. Did you pick up in the lyrics the reference to the psalm? Yeah, it's halfway through in the lyrics on your first page in your bulletin. He walks with me through the valley where death is. It's an allusion. It's not a direct quotation, but it is an allusion. And the people that we see in the video are, is that correct? People like you and me. People who sometimes get into trouble. People who are at the wrong side of the law. People who are despised. People who are not accepted by other people around them. Criminals. People like you and me? Yes, because before God, we are all sinners, and yet Kanye West gets it right when he says, in the midst of all of this, Jesus walks with me. Jesus walks with you. And that brings me to the second question I asked you earlier. Who are the people that in Kanye West's song Jesus is walking with? Did you pick it up? On the lyric sheets, it's actually on the top of the second page. To the hustlers, killers, murderers, drug dealers, even the strippers, Jesus walks with them. And if he walks with all of those, he will also walk with you and me. Before God, we are all sinners. We are all criminals who deserve punishment. And yet, like everybody else, we are loved by the God who is not just our shepherd, but who is also the shepherd of every other human being alive on this earth now, alive in the past, and alive in the future. There is no human being who is beyond God's redemption. There's no human being who is beyond the care of the shepherd. There is no human being that Jesus does not walk along with through the thick and thin of life. I now want to take us, and if we could have the next slide, please, to one of the key verses in the psalm. And we're looking at verse 4 now, and I hope you see I've packed up a new Bible. This is a newer version. If the King James Version is from the 1600s, you then get, in the early 1900s, the Revised Standard Version. That's the child of the King James Version. And then in the 1980s, you get not the Revised Standard Version, you get the New Revised Standard Version. And the New Revised Standard Version, the grandchild of the King James Version, has a different interpretation or translation of verse 4. And you've got it on the screen there, but I'll read it to you from my Bible so that you know I'm going to the sources, right? So here we are. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That's the same. But then in verse 4 it says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil. Did you get that? So the King James Version says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The New Revised Standard Version says, the darkest valley. Have we lost something or gained something here? Now, in the real world, not all of us face actual physical death all the time. But we go through dark times in our lives. And this is one of the metaphors that the ancient poet was using. But sheep in the ancient days and in the modern day times, they have to go through dark valleys from their resting grounds to their feeding grounds and back. We, all of us, have to face situations in our lives that we cannot escape from, where danger lurks at every moment, at every turn of our paths. In the real world of sheep then, this would have been in the shadows of the big boulders at the bottom of valleys where they had to go through to get to the feeding grounds. That's where the bears, the wolves, the lions, and so on were lurking, their predators. And so those boulders, the shadows cast by those boulders, would have been quite literally the shadow of death for them. For us, we encounter people who don't like us, people who hate us, people who despise us, people who look down at us, people who make us feel less than human. We all have had experiences like that, sadly, in our lives. It's unfortunately, because of human nature, inescapable. But Jesus walks with us. Jesus is that Lord who is the shepherd that cares for us with a rod and a staff if need be. And so I want us to hear very clearly that the way Jesus does that is not just in ancient images, but in real life situations today. I know what I'm talking about. I've been a Christian since I was 15. I'm now 55. I have lived with Jesus for 40 years. It's been an absolute privilege to do so and to be able to share the love that I experienced in my own life with others as I'm doing with you now. I can tell you after 40 years of Jesus walking with me through thick and thin of my life, and I've gone through some terrible times in my life, it's worth it. And so I want us to hear very clearly that Jesus is so much more than our shepherd. He is our host in this life and in the life to come. We can trust him. We can entrust ourselves to him, and he will come through for us. And as we trust Jesus and walk with Jesus, as we invite him into our lives and let him walk with us, and as he looks after us, let us remember that Jesus walks with the hustlers and the killers and the drug dealers of Kanye West's music video as well. The people we look down on are just like us, as other people look down on us. Jesus is not just my shepherd and your shepherd. He's the shepherd of every human being on this earth. This is sure ground for faith, for love, and for hope. Yes, there are songs in the modern music industry, and there are songs in this amazing book, the Bible, the revelation of God, that help us to meet God in our everyday lives. And if we go to the next slide, and we are on the next slide, sorry, go back to verse 6, that's where we are. This is the New Revised Standard Version's interpretation or translation of the King James Version. The King James Version said, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's what the NIV says as well. But the New Revised Standard Version has, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. Who is right here? Well, they're both right, as usual. In the Old Testament, people didn't actually believe or were not sure about life after death. And so the Hebrew actually says, all the days of my life, which the NIV captures in the NRSV with my whole life long. But in the ancient translations of the 16th century and the 17th century, Martin Luther in German and the translators of the King James Version in the English-speaking world, they put the word forever there because they were Christians who believed in life after death. Now, what I want us to hear here this morning is so important for you and for me. Because in those two translations together, the poetry of the Old Testament tells us something very, very profound about your and my life. And it's this: as Christians today, we do not just believe in life after death. We also believe in life before death. Jesus walks through the hell of life and through the joys of life with you and me and everybody else today. He is so much more than our shepherd. He is so much more than just our shepherd. He walks with all of us. So I want to take this with you. These two songs that are really one song, the song of God. Jesus walks with you forever and ever and ever. Amen.